Yeah, sure. Okay, let's do Q&A.
Mentioned that you were originally from the oil department, but you joined the space one because you were interested in it. So,
Oh,
did you have to take up any different? Did you have to enroll in different courses to get up to date on the knowledge?
yeah, that's a really great question. And I think I did not, to answer your question very briefly, when I was going from oil and gas to my first space job, it was actually the business degree. So I had already been doing that MBA. And when I was doing the MBA, I wasn't really doing it to join the space sector. But it's interesting because in retrospect, it opened up a lot of different opportunities for me at the intersection of business and tech. And my first job in space was actually using those business skills. So I hadn't planned it, but it just kind of ended up happening. So here, what I would say to you is don't think that you immediately have to go get another degree or a certificate to join the space sector. The important thing is it really depends on the type of role you're looking for. You might already have the skills that you need. And I think that's really important to consider. So when you look at an opportunity and you're interested in it, make sure that you reach out to the people who are recruiting for that opportunity, talk about your background and explain the transferable skills you already have. Because I didn't actually have to go and like get another degree or a certificate to get that first job in space consulting, right? I was using the skills I already had from my business degree. And that's something that we don't often realize. So don't discount what you already know.
I have another question here. It says, I want to become an astronomer, but I'm not able to understand the right way to reach my destination. I don't understand very well which option is right for me, being in electronics and communications and bachelor's of physics.
Yeah, I think you actually have a really great background. I'm not an astronomer, but what I would encourage you to do, I do know through like my planetary science research that the big thing in astronomy right now is exoplanet research, which is very exciting, especially if you're also interested in thinking about astrobiology and the search for life beyond Earth, because we don't know much about these exoplanets. They might be potentially having atmospheres that could be conducive to life. So I think with a degree, you said it was in electronic engineering and you have an undergrad in physics, you would be pursuing perhaps like if you want to be an astronomer, at least in North America, you would be needing a PhD. I would encourage you to reach out to professors in your astronomy department in the school you're already in. So have conversations with them, form that mentorship relationship, explain that you're interested in a path towards becoming an astronomer, ask them how they started teaching astronomy, if they could mentor you on different graduate programs that you should apply to pursue this, because with an undergrad, in physics as well, you already have that science background you need. Even with electrical engineering, you have a lot of transferable skills because what people don't realize is that astronomy, physics, science is very much moving towards programming. Like all of them use Python now. All of them are using MATLAB. Like it's so important to be able to digest those huge data sets that are coming from these observation campaigns that they do with telescopes that the skills you have are really relevant. It's just about finding the right mentor who's already an astronomer who can provide you some guidance on how to get there, and the different types of jobs that might exist, and like the grad school path that you might need to pursue to do this as a profession.
I think that answers the question. Manit, do you have any question? He has raised his hand.
Yes, good evening. I actually am a high school student in India, and I'm thinking to apply in US for my bachelor's in astronomy. But I'm more of interested in the theoretical part of it. Like broadly speaking, I want to be a theoretical astronomer or an astronaut. So, what will you suggest for me? Like, if universities, or should I go for BA or BSc for astronomy if I'm interested in the theoretical aspect?
So you said you're in high school, right?
Yes.
I think this is an interesting thing because some things you need to consider. Well, firstly, again, I would recommend you find someone in your field because I'm not an astronomer. But secondly, I think you need to, maybe you hadn't thought about this, but think about the cost as well of doing an undergrad because in the US and North America, the undergrads are self-financed. You need to look for scholarships. So that's really important. Like apply to schools and apply to scholarships. Um, One option could be you pursue your undergrad in India, and then for graduate school, you go abroad, because typically when you apply for PhDs, those are funded. Like those are kind of like research assistantships. So you apply directly to an advisor or a program, and then they fund you to do research with them. Whereas in undergrad, you have to pay yourself. So that's just one broad thing you should think about. And secondly, I mean, you have to do research. You have to go online. You have to look for astronomy programs. There are different like ranking-based criteria that you could look through to narrow down like what are the top programs. But whenever you're applying, I think it's really important to be realistic and have like a selection of the programs that you really aspire to join, like the top programs. Have sort of like a middle tier, and then you should have a few programs where you think that your chances of getting in are quite good. So there needs to be a breadth of different applications you send in. Again, I'd highly recommend you to find someone who's already in the US or in North America in general, studying in a program that you're interested in. Reach out to them and ask them if they're willing to have a conversation with you about the process of applying.
I think making connections is the point here. That is the only way you can go ahead. So another question. Hi, ma'am. I'm currently doing BSc chemistry and like to work as a research scientist in any space agency, but I don't know how to join in and what will be the eligibility criteria.
Yeah, so sorry, what are you studying? You said research chemist.
No, that is a bachelor's in chemistry, BSc.
Okay. And you want to be a research chemist in a space agency?
Research scientist, she says.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great. I think, you know, you're already on the right path. Again, I'm not at a space agency currently, so I'm not really qualified to provide guidance on this. But just from the outside, what I could say is one thing you need to be mindful of is space agencies are part of the national government in different countries. So for example, when I was in the US as an international student, trying to join NASA, for example, is very challenging because you need to be a US citizen or a permanent resident of the US to join their space agency because it's a federal agency, right? So those restrictions will exist for you. In Canada, you need to be a permanent resident of Canada or a citizen of Canada to work for CSA. So your best bet, like if you want to work at a space agency, would be the one in your country, in this case, Israel. And again, I would highly recommend start doing research on the website, try to understand like what kind of roles are they recruiting for. Find a research scientist at Israel. Like the first person you email is never going to reply to you. Like they might, but you might have to send hundreds of emails, right? Like if you go down this path of trying to find a mentor at Israel who can provide you guidance, you need to probably make a lot of connections and tell them like, okay, this is my background, this is what I'm interested in. I really like what you're doing at Israel. Can you provide me some guidance on like, you know, how you got this opportunity? Are there any internships available? So internships are a really good way to get your foot in the door. Keep an eye out for those internships at space agencies that you can apply for as a student.
All right. So one interesting question here, that which place, according to your knowledge, is the best location or an orbit for a space settlement to be placed for a long time? So which location in space will be the best for space settlement?
Yeah, I think this is a tricky one. In the near term, we're not really going to be going and having like a long-term settlement anywhere beyond Leo for now. Like perhaps you might have another orbital space station. Leo, this ISS is going to probably be retired in a few years. You might have commercial companies putting their own capsules in orbit, but that's not really a long-term solution, right? I think if you think about humanity's next step in space, it likely is going to be Mars, you know, another terrestrial planet with some kind of minimal atmosphere. But then there are other issues, right? It's not the most friendly place for human habitation. It's never going to be like Earth unless you start like doing some major terraforming. You're going to always have to be wearing spacesuits on the surface. There's like high doses of radiation, unless you start like maybe digging tunnels under Mars and you have an underground city one day. But it's all still pretty sci-fi to me. And again, I'm not really a specialist in thinking about those aspects yet, but I do imagine that there's a real big push right now, especially with Elon Musk and SpaceX, of like putting humans on Mars. So we will see how that plays out. I did want to be mindful, Samrit, that I have to drop off at 9:45 a.m. So we have a few more minutes for a couple of questions, but then I'll have to leave.
Hello, ma'am.
Dev can
Yes, Ram. So, yeah. So you have been working with several space startups. So, what are some of the important decisions, that are needed to be taken while starting a rocket or a space company?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think for me, I have not actually worked at a startup in the space sector. I've worked in a startup in the quantum computing sector. I currently work with a few nonprofits, and I do some auxiliary research with the space agency. I can talk broadly about the decision to start a startup in technology, or yeah, I mean, even in space, right? I think if you're looking to be a founder, what you may realize is you need to have a certain risk tolerance. Starting a company is not easy. You're not just taking responsibility for yourself, but for everyone else you bring on board. So, whoever those first few employees or co founders are going to be, you need to have the right team. So, a really important decision is first, you need to look for product market fit. Because I see a lot of startups who they're really in love with the technology they've developed. Oftentimes, I'll see, especially in the tech sector, like there are a bunch of engineers who get together who are in love with the technology they have, but they don't really understand how to use this technology to actually develop a business or a product that will be useful for their customers. So you really need to look at the market first and understand, like, what is the need for what I'm trying to develop? And how can I develop this for the end user? Now, the end user could be a customer, it could be a business to business play. So maybe you're looking to provide a service to the space agency. But whoever you want to serve, I think a really good starting point would be by doing customer interviews, like really trying to understand what their challenges are and how your product or service is going to address that before you take it any further, before you start thinking about hiring your first few employees or going into venture capitalists and raising funds, because they're going to be asking you these questions. Whenever you ask for funding, they really care a lot about the market opportunity because they see cool technology every day. They have 100 founders pitching them, right? But they're not going to bite unless they see that there's a market where they can get a return on their investment.
All right, Gurleen Singh, we can have your question next.
Yes, ma'am. I want to ask that I'm currently pursuing my bachelor degree of aerospace from India, and I'm planning to do my master degree from some other country like in foreign, like US or Canada. So, ma'am, what do you think? Where I can get the best degree, like from which country or from where, in which I will get more job options in future?
Yeah, sorry, what do you want to do your master's in? I didn't hear that part.
Bachelor's in aerospace engineering.
But what do you want to study for your master's?
Same, ma'am. Aerospace degree only I want to do.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. One thing you need to be mindful of is that in the US, you can work in the aerospace sector in certain companies. There's like Planet Labs, there's Loft Orbital, there's a handful that will bring you on a work visa, but the majority of them, there will be restrictions. So it doesn't just exist in NASA and the federal government, but even in the private sector in the US, you have ITAR, which restricts them from hiring foreign nationals. So you may go and get the best aerospace engineering degree in the US if that's what you want. But then later, employment might be more challenging, just something to be mindful of. In Canada, there's really great programs as well. In fact, the program that you pursue really depends on your goals, like what you want to do. And it doesn't just have to be in North America. There's a lot of interesting programs in Germany as well. Do your research, throw a big net, and make sure, like, the program, the course requirements, and the nearby industry meet your criteria, like the topics you're interested in. And then just be mindful that in the US, it's a little bit more challenging for international people to get hired post-education. In Canada, it's a little bit easier because the immigration system here, you can apply yourself, you can get permanent residence quite easily in a couple of years. And then once you get that, you could pretty much work anywhere. So I've personally found that the sector in Canada is a little bit more open. But again, you have to do your own research, right? I think in these kinds of scenarios, it's really important to realize that what was the best decision for me or for your mentor or for someone else might not be the best decision for you. Like, you need to be able to make your own sort of assessment at the end of the day.
So I think with the given time constraint, we can conclude the session over here. And let me come out and say this was brilliant. And I also appreciate that we had this paradigm. I have this experience of talking to students, and they always come up with this question of which degree to do, which course to take. But I feel it was important to break this paradigm to understand that it is not all about courses or a big college or a nice school. It is more about where you want to go, how you can relate your present day skills to your goal, and how we can connect with mentors and peers so that we can pursue further. So I guess
Yeah.
this is an important session for all of us.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for organizing this, and it was really
Thank you
lovely
very much
to,
for joining.
yeah.
I appreciate you spending your time with us. And I also would like to appreciate all the participants to sit attentively. And I have shared a link in the chat box where you can give your feedback and receive your certificate. So I think with that note, we can conclude the session for today. Thank you again. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Mariam.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you, ma'am.
everyone. Take care. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.